Welcome to the CMO Scoop. I'm your host, Lara August. I'm the CEO of Robot Creative. We have worked with thousands of very large small businesses. We write marketing plans and provide marketing leadership to companies on a part-time basis. And these consultants are called fractional CMOs, or chief marketing officers. We have a growing network of CMOs that we place with clients, and each of them brings their own unique backgrounds, experience, and education to the table. So I wanted to take advantage of that. Every month, we'll be having a conversation with one of those CMOs, and we're recording them live rather than just doing a typical, pre-recorded podcast, because we want to cover topics and recurring themes that we see, and we want to give our small business clients and other small businesses the opportunity to ask questions and respond. And today, my guest is Lana Harris. So she is our president and marketing director here at Robot Creative. She serves as a fractional CMO for our clients and also oversees the entire fractional CMO program. She works directly with business owners, CEOs, sales and marketing leaders, and C-level teams to help them develop successful marketing plans. And a critical part of those plans is making sure that you understand the target audience, or audiences, I might add. So that's what we're talking about here today, our target audiences, and using data to better understand them. So thank you for being here, Lana.
Of course. I'm glad to be back on the show.
Awesome. So Lana, you've worked with at least 100 small businesses on their marketing plans. And one of the first requests that we make is for data. Can you talk to our audience about the type of information that we typically ask for?
Sure. Well, if we're talking about marketing planning, we ask for a whole host of data. But when it comes to the target audience portion, we really dig into who they are as people and as businesses and industries. So if we're working with a B2C client, someone who targets consumers, we're going to ask about who their buyers are. How many different segments do they have? Are they men? Are they women? Are they highly educated? Are they high school? What is their household income? What geography do they live in? What are their psychographic interests? What values do they hold, so that we can better understand that audience? And then conversely, if we're working with B2B businesses, we talk about the industries and sectors that they serve. What industries do your clients live in? And then we get into the decision makers and influencers within the organization and who they are as people, and what their roles are, what their job titles are, and what their decision-making drivers are as well. So there's a lot of information. And once we get all that out of our clients' heads, we then ask if they have any data to back it up.
And how does that go? How often does a small business actually have this data readily available? And what is the typical situation?
Most of the time, there's a little bit of information. Most of it is what the client knows intrinsically. That's where we start. But we typically have to dig into their systems to find information that'll back it up. It could come out of the accounting data where we have client profiles set up. It might be in a CRM, though a lot of our clients don't have very robust CRMs that have a lot of data included in it other than basic contact information. And if that's where we start, that's a great place. But a lot of it is hunting and pecking and cobbling information together. So then we usually have to go back and do more of a research type project where we uncover that information and build a profile of these audiences so that we can better understand them.
Excellent. And so let's dig into this data a little bit and why it matters. What are you able to do with it if you have a really clear audience? Tell us more about that.
Sure. So for most of our clients, when we're putting plans together, it starts with the target audience or target audience segments, because it not only drives how you're going to go to market, what those people, what those decision makers think about your product and your segment influence how you're going to market to them. So the audience information helps us identify where we can find them, what platforms, what media will effectively reach them, but also helps you understand their decision drivers. So it really has a big impact on your creative and your messaging and the value proposition you put forward about your business and your service or solution.
This is really important. We see a lot of businesses that, before coming to us or before kind of leveling up their marketing, they're using their intuition, they're using the data points that they have about interactions with clients, but they are kind of winging it when it comes to where to reach clients or how to reach them or what messaging might work. So what we're talking about here today is going to be a much more data-driven approach to understanding that audience. And so I want to talk about some real examples, anonymized, of course, but I think rather than staying high and theoretical, it all sounds great in theory, but let's talk about some real examples where we have used data after doing this initial dig in to have a real different decision-making process or impact on what we're doing.
Absolutely. So one example is kind of a client of ours that's in an IT managed service space. And they had a lot of clients. They're a B2B market. Anyone could be their client. But really digging into their actual contract and sales data, we first were able to identify a size of business that was ideal for them. There's small businesses that couldn't afford them, large enterprise businesses that might have internal teams that they've built up and they don't need to outsource those services. And so we were able to, by size of company, by endpoints managed, come up with a profile that helped us target certain types of businesses. Then we looked at their sectors, what sectors they serve. And there was kind of an overlap of clients that had more sensitivity or risk in certain areas. And so they really wanted to invest in professional services to make sure that their systems were safe. So there were early adopters to, safe and secure networks. But then there were also certain sectors that had buying contracts that could buy through them at a very affordable rate. And so being able to say, okay, well, healthcare and government agencies and education and things like that, we were able to then come up with very specific targeting and messaging programs to help get leads in from clients that they can excel with.
Excellent. And that's a great B2B example, right? For mining that data and honing in on some of those audiences. I mean, sometimes when we meet with a business, they have, businesses are our target customer, or, very broadly speaking, anyone with computers is our target audience, right, or any business that has computers or users. And the more we can drill down on specific groups within that, the more easily we can speak to them. We can find them things. So, Lana, do you have a B2C example that you could share with us?
Yeah, we've worked with several, and one that comes to mind is a restaurant group. So not a big giant chain, a local restaurant group, but has multiple locations. They were noticing that they had their population was aging out, so to speak. And so as their audience got older, their audience size was starting to shrink. So what we were able to do with them is really identify the markers outside of age that really identify their key segments. What was their geographic zones? What were their life stages, their demographic and psychographic profiles that fed into what made people enjoy their restaurant group. And then we were able to match that amongst younger audiences and then map where those people could be found so that we could start getting the next generations of their ideal targets into the restaurants and make them lifelong customers.
Excellent. And, I'm just realizing I'm hearing you say these words that I'm obviously super familiar with, but maybe we should define them for our audience. Can you talk about what demographic details are and what psychographic details are? And just maybe we should pause to elaborate on that just a little bit more so that we know our audience is with us.
Yes, absolutely. So demographic information is kind of the basic who, what of a person is. It's their age, their sex, their education, their household income, their geography of where they live. What makes it really interesting beyond that is when you can layer in psychographic information, and that is more of their political affiliation or their life stages that might influence their decision driving, what kind of how their education might influence what brands or perceptions they are wanting to put out into the world. And so that additional layering on effect really influences those end decision drivers, because not all of it is like cut and dry. Some of it is more about who they are on the inside, as opposed to just where they, how much money they make or what side of town they live on.
Absolutely. And so a lot of times when we're doing audience profiles or this type of research, how savvy they are with technology comes out, not just do they like social media or not, but, how good are they at using a smartphone, which is still, can be an issue, believe it or not. And so, everything from like the channels and the mediums to technology usage, there's a lot of information that can be packed into a profile. So thank you for that pause. And so, we talked about, you gave a couple of really great examples for how data can be used to define kind of the audiences that you're looking for, some messaging and some pain points within them in that the B2B and the B2C example. But sometimes this data isn't just helping us better understand one audience or a changing audience. It can also be used to help figure out which audiences have the most potential. Again, like in this broad sea of like, oh, businesses are our customers, there's a lot of different types of businesses and sizes of businesses and geographic locations of businesses. And so let's talk for a moment just about how you can focus your efforts and your dollars by better segmenting that data.
Yeah, I think it's a statement that can be said all the time is you don't have enough money to advertise to everybody. So if you want your plan to be, especially if you're spending marketing dollars to be efficient, it's great if you can narrow down in on your potential best segments. So what we try and do is really find out which ones can resonate best. We've worked with a company, a B2B company that has kind of general technology for different applications. And so it's kind of the same different products, but can be used in different ways by different segments. And so when we looked at their data, and it was a lot of their sales and recurring revenue and longevity of client data, we were able to identify some best segments. One where they had a lot of use cases where the client would buy multiple solutions, which made them high value, but also had a tendency to stick with them for many years because they have recurring services. And then we compared that to market data. Okay, well, within each of these segments, how big is that audience? Are they already tapped out at like 95% saturation, or are they just the tip of the iceberg? Because that also allows you to understand whether or not how much more reach you have, whether or not it's worth advertising to that market, if either it's too small to be worth it or you're already oversaturated versus where the big pools of opportunity are. And that really helped us understand which segments to go after. Because the messaging was so different amongst each of them, we really had to pick and choose.
And I know, obviously, about the example that you're providing. What was interesting is that the sales and marketing team wasn't able to provide us with a ton of segmentation data. The place we got it was actually from the CFO. So, yes. This is one of the tricks: is what data do you have? Where can we find it? How robust is that data? It's literally how many fields do you have and what data are you capturing about these audience members? And so this particular CFO had industries. I don't know if they actually had it or if they went back and coded it after we did the data request.
Yeah, so they did have it in the accounting data. They didn't have it in the marketing sales CRM data. So we were able to get it out of one system, but not the other. But it worked out in our favor because we could map the industry sectors to actual revenue generated over time. And so that was really helpful.
Yeah. And this was a business that had just, I almost want to say dozens of different industry types that they serve. Huge potential in many of them, but with a limited marketing budget, because every small business has a limited marketing budget. You can't really use the same message for all of them. So we had to use that data to figure out, like, again, like not just who's spent the most with us, but also where is there the most opportunity to make recommendations. And to really, we honed in on, I think it was like 2 or 3. So out of these dozens of opportunities, we were able to hone in on a couple that were going to have the most impact. So
yeah, and this client in particular has been with us for a while. And so the great thing about that data is we can go back to it year after year, see what type of, penetration we've made into those sectors, and then, every quarter look at that and see what needs to be adjusted. Okay, we've got a foothold in over here on banking and finance, for example. Let's go hit those fast food markets. Let's go target somebody else after that. So it helps us be agile as well to see where we're making progress, where we're not, and where we might need to adjust along the way.
Yes. And we work with a lot of really established businesses that have, decades sometimes of customer history, data in different formats. So that's an example of one, that had a lot of data and a lot of history to work with. I also love working with startups. So we met with one just the other day. It was really cool to talk to them at the beginning of the journey, as they said, well, we have all of these. It's a construction industry client that said, we have B2B, we can also do residential, we can do multifamily. They have all of these different opportunities. And I was able to walk them through the process of really developing these kind of personas at the front end and tracking all of this information at the front end, because I said, I guarantee you, 5 years from now, if you were to track what happens among your B2B customers, the property managers versus working with the owners. And then on the residential side, like going through custom home builders versus going, direct to consumer. And I don't think that you're going to think they're all equal 5 years from now. I can almost guarantee that you're going to have favorites in terms of profitability, in terms of how quickly the sales cycle closes. And the only way you can really look back on that objectively is if you set up the tracking in advance. The other way is after the fact, you can go back and you can code everything, which we sometimes do. That can be an activity that's worth it.
It is worth it, but I would agree. It's better to do it on the front end because it becomes a big project after the fact to go back and dig through all that data and try and make sense of it later. So they will be thankful for doing it on the front end.
Yes. So the few examples we've mentioned so far are talking about using data to decide between kind of wildly different audiences, in our minds anyway, and in the way we approach projects. But sometimes we're using it to dig down deeper and to take one large audience and to segment it further. And let's talk for a moment about what that looks like.
Yeah. So I had another client that has what you would probably consider to be a single target audience. It's a parent group. But the difference was different age groups of children and what segments and life stages they are in for the different children ages. And so looking at the data from that perspective, you're then sub-segmenting them because at different stages, they needed different services and different kind of offerings for where they were at. So we were able to look at the business data from a mindset of what are your gaps and how much do you need from each segment? And then how can we then message to those people individual services and programs and reach them individually when they need your services? So all to be said is taking that single audience group and breaking it out much more micro helps you manage the creative and the messaging so it resonates to the person who's making a decision. The more concrete you can make your solution to what they're actually experiencing or going through or needing to solve, the more likely your message resonates with them.
Right. So trying to reach parents, like the parent of somebody that's in grade school or, first grade is going to be very different in terms of the messaging that you would use, the types of approach for somebody that has like a middle school child or a high school child, for example.
Exactly. Yes. Very different things that you're trying to solve for.
Yes. So we've also used the data and this segmentation to look at an audience. Maybe the audience is homogenous in terms of like the age or the behavioral profile, but maybe it's just simply geography. So we have some examples like that as well.
Yeah, we worked with another one. It was actually also kind of parent-child oriented, where they were able to access information from a national parent organization that had a lot of really good analysis of parent groups and different motivators based off of their demographic and kind of psychographic profiles. And so what we were able to do with that is like take their national data and overlay it with our localized geography to identify where these people were within the city, and then develop an advertising strategy to place the right messaging to the right people in the right zones, basically. That's how we kind of solved for that. And that allows us to, again, we're still targeting a wide area and a wide audience, but we're getting the right messages to the right people.
That's super helpful. And sometimes having the data segmented that way will allow you, like, especially if you're dealing with multiple locations, having the data segmented will allow you to turn things on and off in different areas as needed.
Yeah, when you have it separated that way, if you have campaigns that are running and you're hitting your goals in certain areas, you can pull that down and reallocate budget or save budget depending on what your strategy is, and not overspend. I mean, the worst thing, you already know you have a limited budget, so you never want to overspend on a segment and see diminishing returns. So that's a critical piece that you can do with this type of segmenting.
Absolutely. So we're going on and on about data. And there are also lots of changes that are happening with privacy rights and technology that make it even more important for businesses to carefully collect their own data. So why does this matter?
Well, it's the only thing you really own. And so it's really important to collect as much customer first. And first party data means the customers have given it to you directly. So they have filled out a form. They have signed up for a newsletter. They've given you, information upon a prior sale or to inquire about it. So it's information you intrinsically own as an organization. And because of privacy laws, more and more advertising is being masked. So people can opt out of receiving advertising or marketing messages, which is great for individual empowerment to know that you have some amount of control over the media and information that you're receiving. But it makes it harder as a business owner or a marketer to find and effectively reach those people. So the more information you have where your customers or prospects have opted into receiving information from you, the more valuable it is.
Yeah, and just to provide even more contrast there, so the example you've just described is the necessity for having your mailing list, having as many data points on your customers as you can so that you can use that. I think the contrast and what we very commonly see is that a small business will go to the newspaper and or to a local radio or television station. And those ad reps will put together a plan to target a certain audience group that they know that they can reach on their channel. All of that's great. There is nothing wrong with that. So they have certain targeting criteria that they're using. And so you're reaching a certain audience for a while, but you may start with radio and then you may switch to television and you may try some print ads. And so all of that targeting, you could pull that from their initial proposals or from their reports and say okay, here's who we're kind of reaching. But unless you collect that data and match it up to your list, you haven't really built your own demographic profile. You kind of have this really broad advertising picture, and maybe some of those will work better than others, but it doesn't give you the information that you need to say, here's who's responding, here's who our actual customers are.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great layering effect, but if you don't have it on the back end where you can match it up and see what's working and what's not, your actual performance is a little masked and you just don't have as much insight.
Yeah. So I want to pause for just a second and ask Tangela, do we have any questions that have come in at all through the QA? If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in.
The only question that I've seen so far is what are the signs that we are building our strategy around ourselves instead of our buyers?
That's an interesting one. So I definitely think that a strategy around sales is definitely going to be, kind of like, oh, we need a target to be met, whether it's a category, sales number, a number of clients, very general information. Usually, like, I need to hit this dollar amount. When you're doing it around your audience, based on what your audience needs are, you can usually identify more specifically about growth in particular sectors that are opportunities. It gets much more granular, and actually, in my opinion, makes it easier to figure out the strategies of how to get there, in my opinion. Lara, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. If you're selling to a product quota or to a service quota, the focus on that can sometimes distract you from a better needs analysis. Like, who are our customers? What are they saying? Are you asking them what they're saying? And are you finding all of the opportunities that exist within that relationship? So I'm not sure if that exactly answered the question. If we need to clarify it all, please feel free to put a follow-up in the chat. We're happy to answer it, or in the QA, excuse me. Both technologies available.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I can keep going then. So we also want to talk about data integrity. So this is a chore. It's definitely not easy. And do you have any tips for small businesses on how to go about keeping your data clean and up to date?
Yes, I think the biggest thing that I see not happening, so I would recommend, is you need to assign a person to it, not a role or a specific, group of people, because if everybody owns it, nobody owns it. So assigning a specific person and making it a really critical role within their job description to input, manage, and keep this data system clean.
I think you could tie compensation to it, right? Like, it could
absolutely
be a critical part of their job that if this data isn't maintained and kept up to date on a quarterly or annual basis, or whatever it is, annual is pretty long. So, maybe quarterly or real time, setting up the systems to collect it on the front end and then just ensuring its integrity. You can tie general compensation, bonuses, there's a lot of different ways to manage. So you could either use a carrot or a stick. I always say that, right? Figuring out, like, what is the best way to motivate this person in this role to ensure that they're actually seeing it through.
And then to enable them to be able to do it, you've got to have technology or a system to make it happen. I think the days of managing your list in a spreadsheet, I hope, for most people, are coming to an end. A CRM, an ERP system, even just a kind of a scorecard to help ensure that the metrics are happening on top of the system of doing it is really critical for visibility and ensuring whether or not, the data is staying clean, the information is being updated, to even know if you're growing your list of first-party data or not.
Yeah, this technology used to be only available to mid-sized companies like a decade or so ago, right? An ERP system was something that was out of the question for a small business. But with all of the technological advancements we have, it's absolutely affordable. And I would even say, from a sales and marketing perspective, mandatory that a small business have, at a minimum, a CRM, because this isn't just going to give you the company name and, basic address and contact information details. You can track the people and the different decision makers and the different roles. You can track any deals that come in, and the CRM will give you the ability to see how many different times you've reached out to them or had contact with them, how long it's been since you've reached out to them, the time to close for deals, there's wins, there's losses. You can track those reasons in it. It just feels shocking to me when we go into a small business that's still using Post-it notes or spreadsheets. And I say it's shocking to us, but it is so common. So if you're doing it, I don't mean to be offensive. Like, we know that's happening a lot. I just want to encourage you to look for CRMs and these tools that will help you own this data more readily.
And I think what the other common thing is, a lot of clients say, well, we've got our customer data in our accounting system, so we don't know why we need to duplicate it. And I'll tell you why. Because your accounting data doesn't track individual people. Like you said earlier, you're not learning anything more about them other than their purchase history. Your accounting system also isn't tracking prospects and the deal opportunities and the wins and the losses and the close ratio, which I think is really important as a business owner to understand when you can expect, if you know what your pipeline size is, when can you expect that revenue to start coming in based off of your historical close ratio. Those are really important business metrics that outside of a CRM is very manual to calculate.
Yes. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that prospecting information, understanding the world of everyone that you've spoken with and profiling all of those people that you've spoken with to say, like, this group is actually like biting and this group is interested, but they're not taking the next step. So understanding how the sales and marketing funnel works together and how these different segments respond differently, that's something that you can really only analyze well if you're using some form of tracking mechanism. So it's definitely take advantage of technology.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And, so how do we operationalize this? If there's one thing that our listeners should go back and do right now, what do you recommend?
I think the first step is really looking at what data you have. So what is your system? Is it your accounting system? Do you have a CRM? Export it, pull it out, look at it. What are you collecting? What should you be collecting? And then you can make a plan for how to start improving that. Do you need to add a new system on, or do you just need to add fields in your current system and start populating them? But I think a quick survey of what you currently have will help you make a better plan moving forward.
Absolutely. And I said, don't use Excel as your CRM, but taking whatever data you have, whether it's in your CRM or your accounting system, and exporting it quickly into Excel, that gives you a really quick scannable format that you can, just buzz down a column and see how many people you actually have a full, complete name, first name and last name. Do you have the title? Do you have their email addresses? Do you have their cell phone numbers? It'll give you a real eye-opening snapshot of where things are missing. And if you think about, if we really want to be able to reach them, like if we want to be able to do certain digital marketing campaigns, we have to have these emails complete to be able to use that as a list. We need to start collecting that, for example. Then you can turn around and make that a required field for your sales team or in your point of sale system for a more B2C focus. That's why loyalty programs are so popular. They're just trying to get emails. Everyone understands that kind of in theory, but then small businesses lag behind in taking the steps to do that and feel weird about it for some reason. But you shouldn't feel weird about it. You should understand who your customers are and feel fearless about asking, do you want to be on our list? They can say no, but you should ask. Okay, so in terms of something you can do, go and pull that data, see what's there. And then if say some of our listeners do have a CRM, they are collecting some data, and maybe when they pull it, they get some ideas for, okay, maybe we should make that a required field. One of my favorite stories to tell is just, after training sales teams to fill that out. Like we have done this so many times where we've actually gone into a business and met with their sales teams for their weekly huddle to try to say, like, please, like, we need the email addresses, or we need all of these fields filled out. Can you please provide this detail? And
how did you hear about us? Like, just tell us that.
Yes, this is, if you do nothing else, require the field, how did you hear about us? And I have to say, I've got the gray hair to prove it. We've done this long enough to know that your team, if they're first told to indicate how did you hear about us, the way that the thing that they will toggle within the CRM is the first one on the list. Mm-hmm. We've seen this in almost every business that has implemented this, that the very first item starts to get all of the leads. And again, it's just a huge management issue. So if you implement this, how did you hear about us? Make it default to didn't ask. It's my favorite. It will help with training, or put something that you know to be your worst lead source in that first spot, so that if you have somewhat of like an uninspired or even lazy sales team that are just checking something to get past the required field, you'll know clearly when you need to manage this team differently. And so on the one hand, there's making it required. There's trying to double check that data that they're entering. And then on the other hand, I think it's working with them after you do start collecting data to show them, like, we're using this information to buy these really expensive ads to send you leads because we know that you're a sales team that wants leads, or we're using it to buy ads to make the company successful. And, that obviously affects salaries and other things. So you may have to tie it back to why this matters to them.
Yeah, I think it's really important because there's two ways that the information gets into that CRM. It's either a salesperson, an intermediary inputting that information, or an admin, or customers direct, like if you have a form on your website. And so while we want all the information possible, there's a reality to how much people are going to fill out without feeling frustrated. The sales reps, you can have a conversation with them. You can tell them why it's important. You can try and get them on board with what we think we want to know so that we can help improve the sales process. With consumers, there's no talking to them. They either fill out the form or they don't. So there is a more limiting amount of information you take from them on a front end query to make sure that they'll still fill out the form. If you make too many forms, too many fields required, they typically don't fill out the form. So there's kind of a science and an art balance to that, to those types of things. But I think definitely when you've got a captive team, it's really about getting them on board, making them understand why we're doing this, and making sure they believe in it so that they do their best to fill it out authentically and accurately.
Absolutely. So there are a lot of different places that your data could be stored, and there's kind of defaults for what type of data exists in those different places. And we have recently written a blog that you can find on our website that walks through, how well do you understand your target audience? And especially right now, we're in a climate where Gen Z are becoming a stronger purchasing group, influencing purchasing decisions, not just personally, but within businesses. And so we've got these 4 generations, from like Gen Z to millennials to Gen X and boomers, that this very different audiences, and each of them are on completely different channels. Gen Z in particular speaking an entirely different language. Like, I love the YouTube videos and the memes where teachers are interpreting, kids language. I think that that if you haven't reevaluated your customer list recently, now's a really good time to do it, to understand, have you been speaking to these older audiences that really consume things in a certain way? And do you have these new groups that are coming up that are starting to be more influential? How are you addressing and speaking to them? Are you using their language? Are you using their channels? Are you going to be missing out? You could look around at competitors too, to see if they're taking advantage of the changing channels and changing audiences. So I think that that's really important. We're living in a very dynamic time.
Yes, it is really, and it's really fun to compare those generations against each other, because millennials are not kids anymore. It's been a long time since they've been kids, and they are actively in decision-making processes. And so it is critical with them and Gen Z coming up right behind them to understand, their decision-making processes, but also, to your point, where can you find them? Because it's not the same places a lot of times as Gen X and, kind of the boomer generation and older. It's really different. And that's a lot of fun if you're a marketing person, but it does take some tracking.
Yeah, I was very surprised when I have a Gen Z child and a Gen Alpha child, and I was surprised when I went to the latest round of parent teacher conference how many of the teachers were Gen Z. I don't
Oh
know
my
why
God.
that was so surprising, but just the language, the way they related to the children, like it was a good thing. It was a great way, but it just, it really drove home that, and there's a lot of our clients also that may not realize how old these groups now are and how
Yes.
influential. We've got mid 20s, mid to late 20s that are in Gen Z that are, really making important decisions. So I would definitely go back, pull your list, see how well you understand them, think about those audiences, and ask, how did you hear about us?
Yes.
So I want to pause and see and check out the blog on our website also, because it goes much more in depth about the data and these different sources and how to use it. Are there any other questions that the audience might have?
Do you have any tips for small business owners who are so busy running around trying to run their business that they don't have time to dig into the data?
Yes, I definitely feel the pain. I think digging into the data, it's as simple as exporting it. And finding that export button shouldn't take all that long. You can probably Google the software system that you're using and export customer data, right? So if you have it in any kind of system at all, I think that's the starting place. And then if you don't have the time or the capacity to figure out what that data means, like work with a marketer who is accustomed to analyzing that data, to using other third-party resources and tools or industry data to help analyze and understand that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. And I think the part two to that was, do you have any tips on integrating systems? Like I have data in accounting and I have data in Google Sheets and I have data in MailChimp. Like how do I integrate those systems to figure out how to best analyze that data?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it depends on what your systems are, but most modern systems have API hooks, abilities to like link data either one direction or bidirectional. So if it's all leading up into accounting data, you can have a CRM that once a sale is closed, it funnels information up to the next system. But some systems go back and forth so that the sales history and purchase history feeds back into kind of CRM data so that you can kind of evaluate the lifetime value of a customer or see what they purchased and figure out what next thing they might need in their journey with you as a service or provider. But I think it's really about looking at what systems you're trying to put together so that you don't have to input information multiple times. I think that's usually where you find efficiencies, where you can have them feed up to each other. But there's usually some type of API key or connection that can be made. You just have to look into the user information for each platform.
At least for the larger ones, like Salesforce, for example, right? Like they have integration with nearly everything. But it will depend on what platform you're in. And then a lot of people use Zapier to connect different systems. You can also pull the data from, it just depends on who wants the data, right? Also, like if you're the marketing team, then you might ask for data from both systems and combine them. And sometimes that does become somewhat manual or become a cleanup process that gets done quarterly or annually. So this is the struggle with small businesses, is that we don't usually see one comprehensive ERP system in a small business. We usually do see these multiple different systems and trying to do the best we can with gathering, data and syncing them up together. So there is a reality to it.
Thank you. And then our last question is surrounding AI, and it's a bit of a blend between, are there any existing AI tools that can help with analyzing data? So what are your thoughts about the role of AI with data management?
So there's definitely tools that you can use. Most of the kind of AI assistants like ChatGPT, Perplexity, things like that, you can input information into and ask it to analyze. So I think the best thing with the AI tools is to understand what you're asking for. If it's analyzing your own information to give you factual like representations, it's pretty straightforward. If you're wanting AI tools to analyze what are my best segments, you have to understand what you're giving it to compare to and whether or not it's finding reliable sources if it's comparing to something out on the internet, some other piece of information you're asking it to look at. So there's a lot of prompting and validating. You need to always look at source information to really see what you're getting, because it's not 100% accurate, and the AI prompts are very, what would you say, confident in how they present data, but doesn't mean it's actual factual information. So it is something that you can use, but it does take practice, like any other discipline, to understand how to get there. And through an iterative process, you can usually get some good information out of it.
Yeah, I think I would add to that, we talked about the importance of first party data, like having your own data. Like most of the AI tools, the broader ones, can take your data sources and help make some summaries of it, or potentially take two sources of data and help merge them or compare them, or undergo activities like that. But the AI is not going to have psychographic details. It's not going to be able to take address information and contact information and build you profiles, like, unless you're subscribing to a service. So there are a few companies that own that data, like Nielsen is one of the big ones. There are several and credit card companies, like those types of companies, will have lots of information and build really elaborate, like, demographic and psychographic profiles based on purchase histories and other things that they have access to. They'll only give it to you in an anonymized fashion. They'll build groups and you can upload your list, and they'll say, your list kind of looks like this, and here are the groups that we see represented in it. But they're not going to tell you which person matches to which group or anything like that. But I think it's important to understand that, like, that's carefully collected first party data for those companies, and they're not sharing it with, AI necessarily yet. I haven't seen an aggregator that's giving like a free AI option to, like, develop your profiles by, uploading your list. That's a pay to play kind of thing. And it can be in the tens of thousands of dollars if you can't get it directly linked through your credit card data.
And another thing to note is you do need to be careful about what you do upload into an AI assistant, and you need to understand what their privacy rules are. A lot of the free ones utilize whatever information you put into it to help train their global models. And so that puts a risk to any first-party information or personally identifiable information you may have about your customers. So also be very careful to understand what you're uploading and know what the risks are that information could potentially become available in general on the internet.
Great caution. Love AI, many incredible uses for it, including data analysis. But if you ask it, if you upload a list and say, build me customer profiles based on this data, it will. But it's not going to be correct. It's going to be 100% confident, not even 80% accurate in that regard. Like, so not yet. Hopefully we'll get there.
And so this question is geofencing a good use for a marketing strategy?
It can be. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So geofencing has been used as a way to target mobile devices. So instead of serving advertising to a targeted demographic or profiled audience, you're targeting people with devices in a certain geographic zone. So if you're going to be at a trade show or a large conference and you want everybody that's in the kind of convention center and hotels where they might be staying to see your ad because you want them to come visit your booth, it can be a very short burst advertising that helps get people to be more aware of you so that when they pass by your booth, they want to stop and talk. or if you're wanting to promote advertising for your restaurant as people are in the shopping center and surrounding areas to try and get them to come over for happy hour or dinner or whatnot when they're done shopping. You can do some things. It is not the most efficient buy. It is more of a premium buy, and you have very little targeting on top of it to make it efficient, because it's the cost per click and the cost per impression gets quite high, but you're assuming a higher conversion rate. So it can be good for certain use cases, but I don't think it's just generally a great strategy for every marketing plan.
I think that one was the last one for now.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and do our wrap up. If while I'm going through some of this, anyone else has any questions, please feel free to stick them in there and we can stay on a little longer. But I want to thank you all for joining us today. We have a link to a brief survey that Zari will put in the chat. Please take a moment to give us some feedback. I would really appreciate that. Our next live stream will be on Wednesday, October 15th. We have to do it on Wednesday instead of a Thursday. It'll be at noon with Andrew Watson, our Director of Branding here at Robot Creative. We're about to launch a book, a collection of logos that we have designed over our first 25 years in business. And so Andrew and I are going to be going in depth on logo design, and we'll use some examples from the book. You can follow us on Eventbrite for notifications about upcoming live episodes. And past episodes are now available on YouTube. We're adding additional streaming platforms soon. So if you join our mailing list, the best way is to stay in touch is to join our mailing list. We'll notify you of upcoming episodes and also give you access to things like articles and tools that are not available through Eventbrite. So you can get there from our homepage, and Zari will also put a link to our homepage in the chat. So thank you again for joining us for this live recording of the CMO Scoop.